Welcome to the first session of Abstraction, the Myth of the Given on Post-Sellarsian Marxism by J.P. Caron. There's been recently an interest in the possible connections between Wilfred Sellars and his heirs from the Pittsburgh school and Marx and the Marxist tradition. This seminar contributes to the discussion by tackling the issue of real abstractions in the Marxian framework and the Sellarsian problem of critique of the given. It is usually accepted that there are two forms of the given to be criticized in Sellars' info: the epistemic and the categorial givens. The epistemic given corresponds to the information that is both epistemically independent and epistemically efficacious, meaning it is something that is not the result of previous cognitive states while transmitting positive epistemic status to other cognitive states of ours. The second, as Sellars himself puts it, it is the categorical structure of the world, imposing itself of the mind as a seal imposes an image on melted wax, rejecting both forms of the given, builds in the Sellarsian picture a distinctive division of labor between sensible contents and conceptual workings. On the other hand, the idea of real abstraction, as proposed within the Marxist tradition, eschews traditional division between the mental and the real, the abstract and the concrete, the sensible and the conceptual. It commits to a casually efficacious figure of abstraction that is the form of the thought, previous and external of the thought. This amounts to a veritable expropriation of abstract thought. For the prospect of a post-Sellarsian form of Marxism, the question then becomes, does the hypothesis of a real abstractions fall under a form of the given? What is the proper account of the relationship between thought, in the strict sense, and material practice that correctly attributes the roles of condition and the conditioned? Under what condition the thought of real abstraction is compatible with Sellarsian framework? The seminar will proceed by stages in development of a standard argument for compatibility between Sellars and the advocates of real abstraction, but not without some caveats that will be revealed en route. The seminar will be instructed by J.P. Caron. J.P. is a philosopher and musician based in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. He is a professor at the Universidade Federal de Rio de Janeiro and also runs his own record label, Seminal Records. Recently, he has been dedicated to the problem of forms of life as subject to elaboration, and the idea of epistemic social mediation as developed within the collective subset of theoretical practice, of which he is a member. Jean?
Thank you. Welcome all to Real Abstraction in the Midst of the Given. First, I'd start by saying that I'm playing an open game, which is always risky. As all of you know, I sent basically the paper on which it is based, this whole seminar. So if you want to call my bullshit, you may be able to call my bullshit since day one, which is always a risk, because it's all open there. If you want to read it all and give a critique, since day one, you are able to. So, but yeah, basically the seminar will tackle the issues that are discussed in that paper. And instead of, usually things go the other way around, right? Like I start a seminar and sometimes this seminar becomes something else, like a paper or something. In this case, it's the opposite. Usually the seminar will, the different seminars that I give will tackle different issues, and some of them will survive in the final paper, some will not. In this present case is the opposite. Like I'm starting from a finished product in a certain sense. That's even already due for publication at this moment. And I will branch out from the different sections of that paper to different kinds of references that it uses, and trying to flesh out parts of what is maybe left unsaid or implicit in that core paper that is, the blueprint for this seminar. So this is the methodology for this seminar, which is a bit different from what I usually do. Let me start sharing the screen. Let me find my stuff here. There's always this problem with PDF. Just a second. Where is it? Okay. Just a second. So Zoom can recognize the file. Yeah. Okay. Are you seeing this? Yep. Okay. So
Yes.
I usually prefer to transform it into PDF because I like the look of it better than the PowerPoint, actually. So real abstraction, the myth of given, first session, general introduction. Well, I think Icaro has read what was published in this website, but it's basically that. But maybe it can't hurt to, be a little bit redundant for clarification, for clarity. So there's been recently an interest in the possible relationships between Sellars and Marx. So this is one. So this both the seminar and the paper are an intervention into that specific debate that is going on. Like I'd say that maybe the pioneer of this kind of this relationship is Weber, of course. But then Carl Sachs, Martin, a bunch of others are interested, and then there was like the Justin Evans paper and the McNulty paper, a bunch of different attempts at tackling these issues of Sellars and Marx. So we intend to contribute to this discussion by tackling briefly one specific aspect of this topic. So there is a problem, a general problem, and there is one specific way or one specific problem or set of problems that I will use as an entrance to this debate, which is the problem of the relationship between real abstractions in the Marxian framework and the Sellars problem of the critique of the given. And this is not as clear as it seems at first, right in the face of it. So even the basic problem have to be developed into a full form, so we will really understand what's at stake, right? So this approach will test the compatibility of one of Marx's great categorical innovations, the idea of real abstractions, even if it does not appear with this wording in Marx, and the relationship to social practice with the Sellarsian framework that upholds the idea of a space of reasons as answering to the challenge of the critique of the given. One methodological assumption will be to concentrate mostly on Zonhettel's construal of real abstraction. You understand Zonhettel's idea of a materialist account of a transcendental subject and its categories to offer already a point of view that is more congenial to the preoccupations of Sellars' philosophy. As many here already know, like has this Kantian kind of infrastructure, which was updated, upgraded to more historicized Kantianism, but he's interested in epistemology in a very close sense to Kant, and and Zonhettel is also interested in performing a materialist critique of epistemology. So there you have already a kind of different passageway between one and the other. So I think it's also a second methodological assumption here would be to concentrate on Zonhettel, because Zonhettel offers this passageway over Kant between Marx and Sellars. So clear enough, right? So this answer also to a trajectory of different problems that's being tackled in the recent stuff that I've been doing. Some people here follow my seminars for a while already, so they will recognize some of these titles. So initially from 2020, I did the From World Making to Life Forming seminar. And from there on, the problem for me was, I come from the philosophy of language, primarily, not really primarily, because I'm a musician primarily, then I was a philosopher. It's kind of complicated. But in philosophy, I was engaging for a very long time the philosophy of language, particularly Wittgenstein and Goodman, that you all know, I think, both from maybe some of my seminars and some of Rez's seminars. So then I was interested in this problem of world making in Goodman. That became somewhat of a buzzword, and I was interested in the fact that if we inhabit worlds that are our own symbolic making, because they are kind of filtered through the categories that we linguistically mobilize to describe things, not only linguistically in the case of Goodman, but also symbolically in the broader sense, artistic, pictorial, anyway, any kind of symbols, like he has like his own understanding of and classification of symbols. I was interested in the fact that this still leaves the one that makes the understanding out of the picture in a certain sense. So I was interested in a sense, turning the world-making idea onto itself, like folding the fact that we engage the world by building models into that which is making the modeling itself. So in what sense is the agent that is doing the modeling also constituted by the same means that he is mobilizing to constitute, frameworks. So this is what I was calling life forming. So then there's this idea of social structure as material for theoretical and aesthetic elaboration. So if we, through this framework of philosophy of language and stuff like that, all right, we are able to talk about the construction of the theoretical aesthetic elaboration of worlds. So in these seminars, I was thinking of maybe the social structure proper, that is the sociality, that is the ground for these kind of elaborations, to be the subject of this elaboration, or the object of the elaboration, not only the agents doing the elaborating, right? So this was kind of my entrance into this problem that we're tackling today. So there was also this paper, Contribution to the Critique of Political Organization, that I co-authored with the ESTP, that Caron mentioned in the bio, right? And in 2021, there was actually, it was by an invitation by Lika to do a presentation in Russia. I did this on the equality of all minds. And then the first version of the paper that we are using as a blueprint, Real Abstraction the Given, was a presentation that I gave at the School of Materials Research for Katarina Kolozova. This was in 2021, and then there's a shift of themes. I shifted to the idea of real abstraction as a social structure and as cognitive abstraction. So what was interesting is that for me, real abstraction was this kind of also, again, a kind of passageway between the social and the cognitive, like the real social, the real structure of the social, and the abstraction that is performed by cognitive agents. And place and scale also, there's this paper about Ilam and Suzanne. So, and then there was the Atlas of Experimental Politics by the STP again. I was co-authoring it, and this paper that is our blueprint for this seminar was one section, originally one section of the Atlas, a very shorter version, much shorter version. And then the theme shifted somewhat to social forms as epistemic mediation. So it's not like the real abstractions per se, but the real abstractions as the way to understand the epistemic mediations that are performed by being participating in a social form. So you have the paper, the actual paper that we are using, the Real Abstraction of the Given, the final version. Vertigens da Referência, which is there, it's indicated as forthcoming, but actually it was published yesterday in Portuguese. It's out, which is a critique of Paulo Arantes. Actually, it was an invitation also by Regis and Bruno Belém. Bruno Belém was supposed to be here today, but he's not. He had his issues. And Regis is here, so my acknowledgements for inviting. And then the Working Through Political Organizations by the STP that was published actually in December. So if you are interested in this trajectory, it's all kind of mapped out there. This shift between a kind of cognitive point of view, like a disinterested, in a certain sense, cognitive point of view, to an engaged political point of view, where these epistemological preoccupations are participating as a mediation, as a point of mediation between this political change and political understanding, in a certain sense. So let's go. And then this all points to this problem. I was asked for you to read a very short text by Marx, The Method of Political Economy, a very short section in Contribution to the Critique of Political Economy, which is very crucial to our seminar as a whole. So there's this very important quote: "The population is an abstraction if I leave out, for example, the classes of which it is composed. These classes, in turn, are an empty phrase if I'm not familiar with the elements on which they rest, like wage, labor, capital, etc. These later, in turn, presuppose exchange, division of labor, prices, etc. For example, capital is nothing without wage labor, without value, money, price, etc. Thus, if I were to begin with the population, this would be a chaotic conception. The conception here is translation for Vorstellung, of the whole. And I would then, by means of further determination, move analytically towards ever more simple concepts, from the imagined concrete towards ever thinner abstractions, until I had arrived at the simplest determinations. From there, the journey would have to be retraced until I had finally arrived at the population again, but this time not as the chaotic conception of a whole, but as a rich totality of many determinations and relations. The concrete is concrete because it is the concentration of many determinations, hence unity of the diverse. It appears in the process of thinking, therefore, as a process of concentration, as a result, not as a point of departure, even though it is the point of departure in reality, and hence also the point of departure for observation and conception." So this is a crucial paragraph, because it exposes in a nutshell, and it holds a lot of water, like it has a lot of things embedded in this paragraph, like particularly Marx's conception of the relationship between the concrete and the abstract. And I say Marx's because it is very close to Hegel's conception of the difference between what's more abstract and what's more concrete. But at the same time, Marx is polemicizing against the Hegelian idea that he attributes to Hegel of the self-unfolding of reality out of the concept, so to speak. So Marx is talking here about representations in a certain sense. And actually, there is a kind of a doubling of the relationship between the abstract and the concrete, both in the side of reality and in the side of thinking. There's this doubling, and at the same time, there's this implicit critique of empiricist kind of understanding of abstraction. Like you see a concrete object and you abstract a determination, a concept for that concrete object. Here Marx says, like, the concrete is not something, the abstract is not something you abstract from the concrete so much as something that composes the concrete, because the concrete is complexly determined by simpler determinations, right? And this in both sides, both in the side of the reality and both in the side of thought. The problem is, how do you parse the order wherein you recreate or reproduce in thought that which you see in reality? This is from the immanent point of view of Marxist criticism, right? So, and then you have also this further problem, which is the difference between logical order of the ideas and a historical order of the unfolding events. And in this text, he develops a little bit of this point. So a set of problems emerge from Marx's paragraph. A, the conception of concretion in place as a synthesis of multiple abstract determinations. B, the relationship between this synthesis achieved in thought and this synthesis as expressed in the real social whole, contra the productive role of thought as Marx reads in Hegel, the issue which I'm naming the issue of the productivity of thought or concept. So in a certain sense, it's the issue of realism or materialism. C, the nature of the counterparts of the abstractions used to explain the social whole as concrete, which presses the problem of the real abstraction. So I'm being careful with the phrasing because I'm saying the counterparts of the abstractions used to explain the social whole, because I don't want to commit myself to the real abstraction so soon, or to the identity between the notion that is the theoretical notion that I use to explain things, and maybe that pattern that is instantiated in reality in the real determination of the social whole. So I'm talking here about counterparts, because I'm thinking in Sellars terms of, you know, kind of isomorphism between model and what is there outside of the model. This is why. But anyway, the problem, it already raises the issue of the real abstraction, because as we will see in the third session, there is this debate that will be led around Althusser in that session about the status of the relationship between real object and theoretical object, and John Hattle's critique of Althusser and also Brazilian philosopher Gianotti's critique of Althusser, in the sense that for them, in the Marxian picture, it's reality, it's the unfolding of reality itself that creates these categorial modifications. So these categories are, in a certain sense, real. They have causal powers in that sense. And this is a huge thing, right? D, the process by which real abstractions are either grasped or projected onto, I'm here also being cautious. I'm not sure if they are just grasped or project onto, because they are also the product of theoretical construction, onto the real structure to be described, which presses the problem of the given. Because if you just grasp them as they are, you mean you don't have any kind of filter between what appears and what is, which is a classical form of bald realism, which is a classical form of the given. So E, the problem of something that tries to gain knowledge, of the immanence of which it is a part. This is a kind of paraphrase of Sellars that was paraphrased by Ray Brassier in his Transcendental Logic and True Representings, which is a very striking way to put the problem, like we are part of that which we are trying to get knowledge of. So the problem of the dependence or independence of knowledge. And this is very crucial also in the Marxist tradition, regarding, for instance, the thesis of formal and real subsumption, particularly real real subsumption, right? Okay. So, and then the structure of the seminar, just very quickly. Aaron, do you want to mention comment something?
Yeah, I'd love to keep talking about the Marx passage, but if you want to just finish up.
No, come on. Yeah, you can add something if you want.
Yeah, well, I was wondering if you could point to where in the text you're seeing number B. I guess this idea about the productive role of thought.
Oh yeah. Where in the text will be kind of difficult because I have to open here the PDF and see exactly where. But there's a specific. There's a specific paragraph where he says Hegel made a mistake of attributing productive role to the concept, whereas the issue is the reproduction of reality within thinking. There is something to that extent. I'm not sure if you can find it.
I'll look for it. Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking along the lines because this passage from the Grundrisse is
It's both in the Grundrisse and in the contribution of.
Yeah, it comes as that appendix, but yeah, it comes
Mhm.
right after the sort of bits about production in the Grundrisse, where he is where he's going over how production is kind of the main category through which all of these things should be thought, and how the others are sort of moments of production. I think we'll definitely come back to that with Zonretto and
yeah, but you know, this is a caveat to that idea. This whole text is a caveat to the idea that production is fundamental, because he doesn't want production to be fundamental in the ahistorical sense, like he sees the bourgeois economists doing, in a certain sense. This is why there is kind of this paragraph in the contribution is kind of a paragraph, a methodological paragraph, and I think it's a very important text because it's one of the few really methodological texts of political economy, and where he's trying exactly to point to the difference between the historical unfolding, empirical historical unfolding, in the order that the categories unfold historically, and the order they are to be explained in the logical sense. Because then he says something that is very Sellars in a certain sense, like, because Sellars also plays with this difference between what is first in the order of being and what is first in the order of thinking. If you remember correctly, this is very present in Sellars. Marx uses this as well, and it says something to the extent of sometimes I think it was property. I think it was property that is used. Sometimes there is a category that is first, like in Hegel, starts from property, but it is only visible from the standpoint of a more developed category. So even if it is logically first, because you need that category to explain the point of view where you are at, it couldn't be historically first in the same sense, because it couldn't appear as property without the juridical order to enforce
property and family, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So this is
no, I'm sure we'll come back to it. I just feel like he does in those prior things also give examples of the order of thought or superstructure in a more complex way that act as sort of forces of production, right? That don't just act as distribution or exchange, but the ways in which sort of legal and juridical structures act as part of production, and production is this sort of logically prior, comparable to practical reason, in a way that I feel like we'll keep coming back to through the course of the next couple of weeks. But yeah, I guess I would take a little issue with this simple between sort of thought being productive versus or maybe
point taken, but
or I guess between two different metaphors, right? Like because this is what with Zonrettel, it seems sometimes like thought takes on like the Platonic metaphor, right, of projection or shadow, whereas Marx likes the metaphor of superstructure or Überbau, right? Like those have two different metaphorical registers.
And I take sides. Yeah, I agree with you. I agree. That's a good way to put it. But we are kind of anticipating things here. But actually, my paper ended up criticizing a bit on Hattel. I think the way you put is very good, but in a sense, it agrees with what with the critique that I'm doing in a certain sense, because for me, it's not so much as the real abstraction get transmitted to the mind, which is kind of this Platonic kind of metaphor. Like you have this thing that emerges out of blind social practice and it gets transmitted. This is where I think there's a form, at least a form of expression that lends itself to a form of the given. Because Van Hattel is talking something like to the extent that it's almost like you could see the real abstraction. And it's really weird because it's unconscious. You don't need to be a conscious agent, but at the same time, your dog is not doing it. It's only humans are doing it. So there's a kind of interesting liminal, I'd say, role for the exchange abstraction. But the problem is that it gets transmitted to the mind. So how does it get transmitted to the mind? This is a problem. And the way Zonhettel says it, it's almost like he repeats that which he's criticizing in the reflection theories. He's saying the reflection theories, in a certain sense, fall into the given. They attribute to the reality certain forms of dialectics that are prone, they attribute actually to natural reality, forms of dialectic that are specific to social reality, and in a form that is a basically direct transmission. But then repeats the same gesture in a certain sense unexpectedly, because he's building up this edifice to do something else. And in this crucial moment of the transmission, you have this lack of resources to talk about how it gets transmitted. So I prefer to say that there's a difference in the space of justifications. In a sense, this is a kind of a superstructural kind of modification, because if you exchange in the market, you can justify things differently. If you consider equivalences that are impossible to consider from the purely natural empirical standpoint, the space of justification was enriched in a certain sense, and both enriched and impoverished, because then we are slaves to the commodity form. But anyway, there's this kind of modification of the space of justification. So this is the way I think the space of reasons would actually reflect on the modification that is brought about by a certain form of social practice that blindly emerge these forms of abstraction and connection between things that were unconnected or unconnected in that way before, right? Did I answer?
I think so, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's keep going, but yeah, it's a good start. Thanks.
Raviv?
Yeah, I just want to be brief, but I was curious about the notion of social whole as it shows up in these arguments, and I was wondering if you could just maybe just clarify for me what exactly is being referred to by a concept of a social whole, and why doesn't
you mean in the Marxian arguments specifically?
Right. I had a feeling that it was something to do with that, but I guess
I'm not. Yeah, sorry. Go on. Sorry.
I believe that this formulation, in the way it's being utilized, is different from the notion of population that Marx criticizes in this paragraph, but I'm having a bit of difficulty convincing myself why that's the case and
I'm not sure it's that. I'm not sure. I wouldn't say they are different from the concept of population the way Marx is criticizing. I think there are two uses.
Well, I'm not saying it's clearly they refer to different things, but what I'm asking is,
of course. I mean,
what
I meant is the following. I don't think that either population, the concept of population as he's criticizing, or the concept of social whole, they either fall squarely into one or other of these two uses. I'll say, I think you have both uses for each concept. One use is the abstractive use, which for instance, Zonhettel would connect to empiricism, a certain form of abstractive way of thinking. Like you see something, you give a name, and you manipulate that name, that word, as if you are manipulating the category.
Okay.
So something like in that sense. So you have this use, and then what Marx is describing here is the reconstruction of the object that is captured by this little piece of syntax, this word population, in its complexity, with all the mediations that comprise this object. And then he says at the end, you can use population, of course. Population has a role, but as a placeholder for all these determinations, once you performed all the unfolding of the categorial unfolding to understand actually what is a population.
Right.
And the same with the social whole. You can have like the whole like that, But you can have a social whole in the sense here, when I use this in these arguments, is in the sense of this placeholder of this for this complexity to be described.
Okay,
you can defer to future description. You can say, there is a social whole, but I'm not just abstracting and use it as it is. I'm deferring to future description of what actually is constituting this social whole.
So it has more to do with the position of the term in the syntax of the argument than like what it's referring to.
I'll say yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Thanks.
Okay, good questions already. Let's go. So there's just a very quick overview, like session 1. We already used up some of the time, but anyway, we'll be talking about the problem of the given more specifically after this brief introduction of about Marxian methodology. And 1 and 2 are very straightforward. The second session next week will be about real abstraction, and the main text will be Zone Battles, part 1. Right? This is not problematic. But what is interesting here, session 3 will be a debate in a certain sense that is kind of rehearsed also in my paper, RAG sections 4 and 5, between Althusser, the text on the materialist dialectic that reflects exactly on this paragraph that I'm using here today, both on that is present both in the Congrès and in the contribution to the critique of political economy. And the Gianotti critique. Gianotti is a very interesting Brazilian philosopher. I have to translate the text for you because it's not available in English. And this is a very historical text, very important text here for Brazilian Marxism, particularly the type of Marxism that was practiced in the University of São Paulo. And this text is from the 60s, in the end of the 60s. Was it? Yeah, I think it was 69, I think, was that? Yeah. And it was already a kind of a form of reception of Althusserian philosophy. And the basic argument of Gianotti is that one that was kind of remembering here earlier, that Althusser does not account for the fact that these categories are real categories of capital. Like the distinction between the theoretical object and the real object leaves no room for this mediation that is actually captured by a theoretical object, but it has which has a counterpart in the structure that is could be captured within the idea of a real abstraction in the Zonderheitelian term. But I think Gianotti has actually a very fantastic, I think, very great solution to this problem. Unfortunately, it is in a text that I can't possibly translate for this seminar, which is called Imperativos da Ilusão, Imperatives of the Illusion, which is chapter 1 of Trabalho e Reflexão, book called Labor and Reflection, which is the idea of operational scheme, which is a fantastic passageway between pattern-governed behavior and real abstraction. But anyway, this is something that I'm profiting off in my paper. So session 3 will be around this issue of the status of the theoretical object and its relationship to real patterns, let us call it that way. Session 4 on the concreteness of abstractions. Of course, the title, I changed a little bit the title. I published something about the transformation between the real to the thought or something like that, but actually this became session 3, right? And the unconcreteness of abstractions is the idea that we are already always enmeshed in social form determinations that carry information about the social whole. This is kind of maybe a polemical kind of statement, but it will be developed with the ending of the paper, and then this paper by the subset of theoretical practice working through political organizations, which is basically about that problem, how to use the specific social organizations as social mediations that carry information about the environment they are enmeshed in. So in a certain sense, there is a epistemic dimension to political organizing, right? And not only a political dimension to epistemology. So, and then there's this text by Robert Kurz, Domination Without Subject, and I think it makes a good counterpoint between maybe a positive role that these social mediations can have according to the subset of theoretical practice, and this idea of, enslavement to the value form that capital brings over. So I think this will be an interesting, and this is something that the subset of theoretical practice wanted to do for a long time, which is this debate between value form theory people and what the subset is doing out of, for instance, Karatani and different forms of contemporary Marxism, which will be kind of at least rehearsed, attempted or sketched in this fourth session. Okay. So and this is the whole seminar. Okay. So then here I'll start the Sellars bit, because we have to understand finally what is this business about the given. I take it that many of you know already about this, because we are in the new center, which has a lot of Sellarsians teaching all of that, and I took the canonical text for presenting it, which is the beginning of Empiricism and Philosophy of Mind. Maybe I took too much of it. Then I read it again, like 40 pages of very, very, very dry and complex arguments. But I'll try to make it simple today and really take out the essentials of what's being said, because there's a lot also of lateral debates that he's having with different philosophers from the time in the analytic philosophy moment in the 50s, right? So. But any further questions before I delve into the given, because we'll be talking about this for a while. No? Anybody? Okay. Sometimes you can ask clarification questions as well. I know there's a lot of new people to the new center. If you have any difficulties, I can explain again things, right? There's no problem whatsoever. Sometimes I tend to go too fast sometimes because I'm excitable, but you can ask for clarification. I'll gladly repeat. So then, if there are no questions, without further ado, just a second. What's that? Okay. So is there a question in the chat, perhaps?
Yeah, just asked if you could repeat the name of the Giannotti book.
Giannotti, yeah. Anna is correct. Trabalho e Reflexão. It's fantastic. But this is a polemical opinion. Okay, so Giannotti is not very well received in the Marxist circles here, because eventually he turned to center right, but many people do that. But he's a very unique example of a philosopher that comes from Marxism, and then had a profound engagement with Wittgenstein and philosophy of language. So this is very precious, because it's very rare, and he's a very rigorous philosopher. He's one of the most rigorous philosophers working in the tradition of the University of São Paulo. Anyway, so Wilfred Sellars on the given then. This is the beginning. I presume that no philosopher who has attacked the philosophical idea of givenness, or to use the Hegelian term, immediacy, has intended to deny that there is a difference between inferring that something is the case and, for example, seeing it to be the case. Why I put that in, this is the first phrase, because it's important, because it's an important clarification. Sometimes people read like a critique of the given and they say, oh, there's nothing given whatsoever. It's like Sellars is like this super ultra idealist and stuff like that. I don't think this is right. Actually, there is an unproblematic, and this is also repeated in section 8 of Empiricism and Philosophy of Mind. There is an unproblematic concept of the given, in a certain sense that, well, there are stimuli that comes from outside. Like there is an unproblematic concept of the given in that sense. But the philosophical concept of the given is not that one, that unproblematic concept, right? The philosophical concept of the given is a concept basically that these are foundational, that these can ground the whole edifice of epistemology and of thought. So this is actually the target of Sellars. So if the term given referred merely to what is observed as being observed, or perhaps to a proper subset of the things we are said to determine by observation, the existence of data would be as non-controversial as the existence of philosophical perplexities. So then he continues, many things have been said to be given. So also this is important. The given is not just, of course, I asked you to read from sessions 1 to 3 from Empiricism and the Philosophy of Mind. Actually, I shouldn't ask for you to read session 2 because it's really too technical and really too connected to the historical moment. I should have asked 1 and 3, mea culpa there. But anyway, he concentrates there in the problem of sense data, right? Of the idea of given as philosophers of sense data use it. And then in session 3, philosophers of appearings. They may countenance or they may commit ontologically to physical objects, but they will treat the appearances of these physical objects as primordial or a priority, in the sense that they are that which you can't really doubt, in a certain sense. So you have like these two, in these 3 sessions, you have like these 2 different targets that have to do with that which is certain, and what is certain is that which is given, in a certain sense. This is the critique. And here in the beginning, he's already offering some caveats to his chosen targets and saying you may have different forms of the given, like we can think of sense contents as given, material objects as given, which are actually the 2 examples that he tackles in these first sessions. Universals as given. Universals, there's a way to get universals as given within built within the inconsistent triad that we will be talking about in a short time. Propositions as given, real connections, first principles, even givenness itself. There is indeed a certain way of construing the situations with philosophers analyzing these terms, which can be said to be the framework of givenness. This framework has been a common feature of most of the major systems of philosophy, including, to use a Kantian turn of phrase, both dogmatic rationalism and skeptical empiricism. It has indeed been so pervasive that few, if any, philosophers have been altogether free of it. He's so radical here that maybe even not himself. Certainly not Kant, and I would argue not even Hegel, that great foe of immediacy. Often what is attacked under its name are only specific varieties of given. Intuitive first principles and synthetic necessary connections were the first to come under attack, and many who today attack the whole idea of givenness, and they are in increasing number, are really only attacking sense data. So Aaron, want to comment on something?
Oh, just to clarify on when he's referring to the philosophers of appearance, he means the phenomenologists, right? Do you see this?
Not sure. I think perhaps the phenomenologists are a good candidate. I would think of the 2 candidates as phenomenalists. Like the first one are phenomenalists, not phenomenologists, but phenomenalists, those that construct objects out of appearances, which is also, this is something that he briefly tackles. I'm sure those who are unfamiliar with Sellars had difficulties in this passage, which is the difference between analysis and explanation, right? But the phenomenalists, in a certain sense, they construct concreta out of appearances, out of these sense data. So a good example of a phenomenalist in the beginning is Nelson Goodman, for instance. In The Structure of Appearance, exactly, he devises a phenomenalist system for constructing objects. And the primitives are appearances, are sense data, in a certain sense. And when you use appearances, usually you are presupposing already the existence of the physical object. So this is the subtle difference between those. The first one are phenomenalists. The second type are physicalists already, because they countenance physical objects, but at the same time, they want to hold on to, you know, a certain idea of Cartesian doubt, in a certain sense. I have to hold on to that which is most certain, which is that of the object that I see internally. That is a kind of an experience that I possess of the object, not the object out there. So I guess you were right. Perhaps phenomenologists would be a certain form of phenomenology. There's a debate to be had there, for instance, between the first Husserl and second Husserl. Not sure. This is also Reza's department at the moment. But there are debates about this. Which one is the realist Husserl, the idealist Husserl, and what does this difference entail? But I think you are on the right track, because there is something to it in the difference between a phenomenologist in the Husserlian sense, perhaps, and a phenomenalist in the Wiener Kreis, Goodman kind of vein.
That's helpful.
And this can be mapped onto the difference between explaining and analyzing. The phenomenalists analyze objects in terms of its sense data. They are concretions out of sense data and nothing else. Whereas the phenomenologist would explain perhaps what appears of the object without thereby, how to say that, there's an English word missing. I have only the French one, épuiser, sans épuiser l'objet. Do you understand that? Anybody knows?
Épuiser.
Épuiser is like esgotar objeto without.
It exhausts?
Okay. Exhausting, without exhausting the object. That's it. Without exhausting the object.
Oh, and one last thing that would be helpful. You're using the science perception reality version of the text, right?
Yes, I think so, because yeah.
I just want to clarify.
Actually, there's a difference. I'm using the science perception reality for the paper, but for the class, I was actually using the standalone version, because I wanted to use the Brandon. I used the Brandon explanation in one section. Okay.
Good, because so then when you use numbers, you're using the section number, not the paragraph number.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Raviv.
I was curious if the given as Sellars describes it applies only to things that have a function in like a philosophical system, or like a system of understanding, or like some kind of total thing, or if they can apply to like smaller, like sort of socio-linguistic practices or something, like for instance, when you're writing a mathematical proof and you assert something is given, is that
I don't think that's a problem for
right, because is that because of the admission that first principle is contingent and not necessary, and it just applies to this small subset of like, okay, for this amount of text we're assuming this proposition or something like that?
Yeah, I'd say that is because of the axiomatic nature of the assumption.
Right.
You can assume anything you want, as long as it's a tool for thinking. You know, so in the sense of math, you can assume stuff and not necessarily take them as true because they are evident. They are a piece of evidence.
Right. So the critique here is about the role that a given plays in a larger system of understanding, or
I'll say yes. Yeah. At the same time, you were in my Wittgenstein class. There's an interesting connection between this and that, because, for instance, it is at the same time unavoidable to take things as given.
Yeah.
In the Wittgenstein class, we were talking about this, the fact that training, the background, you have to have a background, and the background decides certain truths as even analytic because of the background itself.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, but these are not what is Wittgenstein strategies, which is completely different from Sellars, is that you should not take these certainties, background certainties, as propositional truths. There's a difference between background certainty and propositional truth. You have to have certainty of something in order to start something and do something in the world, even if these are not philosophical propositional truths in that sense. And what's an innovation of Wittgenstein there is that one does not entail immediately the other. You may have certainty of stuff that is not true, right?
Yeah.
And they are necessary certainties, which of course also for the Marxists amongst us ring a bell also of the necessary illusion and these kinds of stuff. Sure. It's also an interesting passageway between Wittgenstein and Marx as well. And Sellars, I think, has some, is not, of course, the methodology is completely different, but it has something of that. Like it's okay to assume stuff. It's okay that some stuff will be treated as given. It's okay that you will act on what you observe, obviously. But the problem is that these are not necessarily foundations for knowledge. They cannot play this role. Like an experience that you have is not by itself a knowledge of the experience that you have.
And you know, I think going back to Wittgenstein for a second and his conception of mathematics as kind of a social activity, which is, I guess, my understanding of his idea of mathematics. Maybe that's incorrect. I mean, in that light, what you're saying about this not applying to mathematics kind of makes perfect sense, right? I mean, if you understand, you know, writing a proof, for instance, as just, you know, participating in a set of like normative linguistic standards and stuff, and things that are entirely context dependent, you know, like someone has to read your proof and say that it's good and stuff.
Yeah, I think you're right. And Wittgenstein has kind of this constructivist kind of position on math. But I think it's the weakest part of Wittgenstein for me, because because I think he's not because I think he's wrong about math, completely wrong about math. I don't think he's completely wrong about math, but I think it's one-sided. And in this, I'm more of an inferentialist than a Wittgensteinian in a certain sense, like in the sense that you only discover the truth through necessary certainty. I'll say that this is kind of a nice formula.
Yeah,
like you have to have a social practice in order to discover something that is objective beyond the social practice.
Sure.
You see?
This is getting a little off topic, but I really like Wittgenstein's math. I think just because it, I think, tends to privilege mathematics as a procedure or a social activity as opposed to a set of theories or like a body of knowledge per se, which I kind of like.
Yeah, but this is Wittgenstein about everything, right? Like he said that even philosophy is not a theory; it's an activity. And,
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think particularly in mathematics, this is needed as a part of the theoretical. But
Yeah, I think it's harder
I
to
agree.
defend Wittgenstein in math. But
no, I
anyway.
agree that it's I agree that it's one-sided completely. But I just think it's
Lika?
Do you happen to know who are the theorists of sense data?
Oh yeah, AJ Ayer.
Where does the
AJ
term
Ayer
come
is AJ
from?
Ayer all the time. They hate AJ Ayer.
AJ
Ayer,
okay.
yeah.
So
yeah,
it's like his term?
It's a popularizer of the Wiener Kreis. Of course, Wiener Kreis, the third circle of Vienna, they are much more sophisticated than what Sellars is portraying here sometimes. But Sellars uses, at one point, he uses Konstatierungen, which is a schlick vocabulary. So Moritz Schlick, I'd say, is a candidate. But he's not giving names. This is a problem. But
Yeah.
arguably some one phase of Carnap, arguably.
Yeah. I've heard of Ayer, of course. And does this AJ Ayer, does he use the term sense content as well, or it is a product of the Sellarsian analysis of the?
I think he uses sense
data.
data. Sense data is a Russellian also. Of course, Bertrand Russell, yes, obviously. Sense data is a Russellian term. Yeah.
Oh.
So the British
sense
use
content.
a lot. Sense content. Not sure. Sense contents. I'm not sure. I want. Yeah. Perhaps it has for me more like a Germanic ring than a British one. But this is an intuition, so I'm not sure.
Can
like I
it
would
be
say,
so
like an
that-
inhalt of sorts, like sense content.
So
I'm not sure.
maybe it's Sellars who analyzes.
I
it,
wouldn't
right?
say that either. I think we have to pursue that to see exactly.
Okay.
But this is a hard exegetical work to see, like, from phrase to phrase who is referring to. This is And it's completely beside the point of the seminar to be in that degree of detail. But yeah, that's a great question in the sense, if you want to really know what Sellars is talking about in the very fine-grained sense, of course. Thank you, Luca. Luca?
Hi, JP Caron. So I was just wondering if one of these given is also or could be considered in these Laruellian terms the separation of the thought and real, or is it not? Does this not?
Sorry, I didn't catch what you said. With separation of what? Sorry.
Like Laruelle has this idea that this splitting or incision between the real, the alterity, the radical outside, and the thought never actually, that the decision of noumen and phenomenon actually never happened, and that it is one of these given type of myths that philosophy just took on. And I'm just thinking, is it?
I'd say it's the opposite in Laruelle. Sometimes I have the sense that Laruelle is completely pro-given, and he says that any philosophizing is actually too constructivist. But I may be completely wrong about Laruelle. It's been a while since I read Laruelle. One way, I at least point you, perhaps you know this already, but one productive way to compare Laruelle and Sellars is through Ray, right? Like Ray had this chapter in Nihil Unbound about Laruelle, chapter 7. No, sorry, 5. 7 is Deleuze and Heidegger. Chapter 5, and to analyze what, and Laruelle is the chapter on Laruelle is the key to Nihil Unbound, really. And to analyze why he shifted from Laruelle back to Sellars, because Sellars was present in the first chapter and then abandoned, right? He was present in half of the first chapter, and then he thought that the churchlands had the answer he was hoping for, and no. And then the book goes on searching for it in Adorno, then Meillassoux, then Badiou, then Laruelle, then Deleuze and Heidegger, and then the bunch of stuff that is in the 7th chapter. So there's an abandonment of Sellars there, and Laruelle is supposed to furnish him with what he needs, which is a certain identity between thinker and the content of what is thought. But it's not an identity from the side of thinking, it's an identity from the side of immanence, of the one, right? Like it's, what was Laruelle's name for that? Is unilateralization.
Vision in one, no? No,
Vision
sorry.
in one and unilateralization, right?
Well,
One differentiates from the other without the other differentiating from the one. Yeah. And yeah, this was Ray's solution through Laruelle to the problem of gaining knowledge of the immanence of which you are a part. And then he turned to Sellars because he thought maybe to examine why he went back to Sellars for so many years to understand this problem. Maybe is an interesting way to engage what there is in common between Laruelle and Sellars and what is different between them. Just a suggestion, because I really don't have much resources.
No, for sure, I will.
I don't have much resources to answer because I'm not a Laruellian myself. I have an interest because I have an interest also in Ray's work, and I had a student that in Brazil that actually I think he wrote the first master's thesis on Laruelle here, like in last year, a couple of years, like Aquiles Guimarães. I was directing it, but he was much more proficient in Laruelle than I am. So I think this is a pointer. I can give you a pointer only. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Okay. So on sensing and knowledge, facts or particulars. Then he switches to this weird question, which is weird for those who don't speak the language of analytic philosophy at the time, right? But what are you sensing? Do you sense what do you have knowledge of? You have knowledge of particulars, or do you have knowledge of facts? And knowledge here, there is something that is implicit here in Sellars' argument. That is the idea that knowledge is something that is codified in language by that clauses. Like, I know that today is hot. The weather is hot today, at least here, not in where Lika is or where Iron is, but here it is hot. I know that, I don't know, I've been sick this week, whatever. So everything that is codified that follows that clause is a fact, because it attributes some kind of property to some kind of object. It's kind of a state of affairs, as Wittgenstein would say in the Tractatus. So knowledge has to do with the connection between particulars, not with the particulars themselves, which are sensed. So I have this kind of implicit idea here, okay, that you have to bear in mind. But you have maybe we can't really have like the full argument regarding this difference, because it's a immense philosophical question. But anyway, it's implicit here. Just bear in mind this. But there are good reasons for what Sellars is saying here. So he says the following. Now, if we bear in mind that the point of the epistemological category of the given is presumably to explicate the idea that empirical knowledge rests on a foundation of non-inferential knowledge of matter of fact. I put this in bold because I think it's a very important kind of definition of what, not of the given, but what philosophers are searching for in the given, which is the idea of a foundation that has to do with something that is true, that there is a kind of non-inferential knowledge, that you have knowledge of, we have kind of, there is non-inferential knowledge, like we gain knowledge from observing states of affairs. This is non-problematic, but they want to turn this kind of non-inferential knowledge into a foundation. And further, this foundation of non-inferential knowledge ought to be related to pure sensings. And then the question arises, are these sensings a case of knowledge? Is sensing something the same as gaining knowledge of something, right? So here's the crux of the argument, the crux of the issue here. We may well experience a feeling of surprise on noting that according to sense datum theorists, It is particulars that are sensed. So for sense data theories, particulars are sensed. Okay? For what is known, even in non-inferential knowledge, is facts rather than particulars. So knowledge has to do with facts. Sensation has to do with particulars. One-to-one relationships, very simple. Items of the form, something's being thus and so, as I mentioned, today is hot here in Rio, or something standing in a certain relation to something else. It's hotter in Rio today than it is where Aaron lives in New York, like for example. It would seem then that the sensing of sense contents cannot constitute knowledge, inferential or non-inferential. If so, we may well ask, what light does the concept of a sense datum throw on the foundations of empirical knowledge? So you have a severing of the relationship between a pure sensing, which is not a case of knowledge, and a non-inferential knowledge that I can observe, for instance, that the pen is over the table. I had non-inferential knowledge. I didn't come to that knowledge through any inferring from any other more fundamental true statements. I just observe it, right? So this is non-inferential knowledge. So the question here is this an item of pure sensation, or is there more to this statement? I'm seeing that, I don't know, the book is on the table, my computer is on the table. Is there more to this statement than pure sensation, right? And then he parts this in this problem of the sense. The idea is that sense datum theorists want to have the cake and eat it too. They want to have it both ways. So here he says, A, it is particulars which are sensed. Sensing is not knowing. The existence of sense data does not logically imply the existence of knowledge, because you only sense particulars. It's kind of a different department, okay? And B, sensing is a form of knowing. It is facts rather than particulars which are sensed. There's a contradiction there, but they are after this item that will function both as the particulars are functioning in A and as knowledge is functioning in B, right? This is the given. There is something that is sensed, that is immediate, and at the same time is able to justify stuff, to be a form of knowledge. And to justify stuff, and there is a kind of a formal proof to be shown here, but I won't do it because anyway, it's a little beside the point. But to infer stuff, you have to have already a kind of complex of objects in order to be able to infer something out of something else. So you don't have an inference out of a pure singular item of sensation. So here's a problem as Brandon puts it. If you check the standalone version of Empiricism and Philosophy of Mind, as Aaron was asking, you have the study guide in the end, and you have this nice diagram that Brandon did about the problem. And this is a couple of paragraphs by Brandon about this problem. So I have these relationships, right? Physical objects, which entail sensings of sense contents, which entail non-inferential beliefs, which entail inferential beliefs. So you have like degrees of separation from the source of the knowledge, which is the physical object in this picture, right? And Brandon says here, in the standard perceptual case, it is because there is a red object with an octagonal facing surface in front of me that I find myself with a sensing of a red and octagonal sense content. So first arrow. It is because I have such a sense content that I acquire the non-inferential belief that there is a red and octagonal object in front of me. Second arrow. And it is because I have this belief, together perhaps with other beliefs, that I am justified in the further inferential belief that there is a stop sign in front of me. Third arrow. The point of focus is on the nature of the becauses. The first arrow 1 can be understood as a causal notion, perhaps the sort studied by students of neurophysiology of perception. Because it's a form of contact, right? You see stuff is there, you see the stuff. It's like causal. There's no reasoning entering, or no abstraction. Is something, you see something of the object. Be careful with the distinction. You see something of the object, but you do not see the object as something. To see the object as something is to conceptualize the object. But to see something of the object, you just see the surface that the object offers to a device that is able to receive that stimulus. It's a causal process, right? So the first can be understood as a causal notion. As such, it relates particulars describable in a non-normative vocabulary. It's just a vocabulary of the way things are, right? This is a matter of factual, non-epistemic relation. The final because, arrow 3, that goes from non-inferential beliefs to inferential beliefs, on the other hand, indicates the sort of relation Sellars calls epistemic. It is an inferential notion, relating sententially structured beliefs or believables, which are repeatable abstracta. Like you can repeat a sentence, right? In different occasions, and they may have or may not have different reference. A matter of reasons rather than causes. This justificatory relation is not a natural one, but a normative one. It is not the empirical scientist, but the logician or the epistemologist who has the final say about it. The question is, what sort of relation is the middle one, arrow 2? I think this parses really well, isolates really well where is the problem. Like the problem is the passage between sheer sensings to non-inferential beliefs. And of course, Sellars accepts that you have to have sensings in order to have non-inferential beliefs. But remind you that in our Marx paragraph, we already encountered a kind of a structure like that. It's not that, you know, a certain category necessarily leads to the other, but that you need the first category from the standpoint of the other. And here is kind of similar. You have non-inferential beliefs, but to have non-inferential beliefs, you have to have the sensings. This is not to say that the sensings by themselves entail non-inferential beliefs, only that from the standpoint of the more complex notion, non-inferential beliefs, you have to recognize as a component of this complex notion of non-inferential belief, the idea of a sensing. Nika?
Can you please give an example of a non-inferential belief?
I gave several, like there's a pen in front of me.
Isn't it, but isn't it
Okay.
your sensing of sense? It's not sensing of sense contents. It's a non-inferential.
Of course, it contains a sensing. But I'm able to affirm it. And what I'm doing when I'm affirming it? What kind of thing I'm describing?
Oh, okay. So, it's
no,
like
let me rephrase the question. Am I describing a particular when I say I see a pen in front of the table? Or am I describing a state of affairs, for instance? It's a state of affairs, right? Like the pen is over the table. I see it. I have non-inferential belief because I can't possibly infer from, I don't know, any other statement. Let us say I'm in the bedroom. I'm not seeing the pen and I'm looking for this pen. Maybe I could infer that maybe it's on the table of the living room. I'm not sure, but it's kind of difficult to infer that it is uniquely on the table of the living room. I would say maybe it's on the living room. Okay, this might be an inferential hypothesis that turned to be true if I have non-inferential observation that the pen is in the living room. The difference is just that inferential beliefs are beliefs that you arrive as conclusion of premises, previously accepted premises. Whereas a non-inferential belief is just something you come into contact with, observational contact. You see the stuff going on. You don't arrive at that belief through a process of reasoning. You arrive at that belief by seeing it. You see the stuff going on. That's the difference. So this is easy enough, right? Inferential beliefs and non-inferential beliefs, this is easy. The problem is sense contents and non-inferential beliefs. The idea here is that I can't possibly, through sheer sense contents, say that a pen is on the table. Because there's more to saying that a pen is on the table than having the sense content of the surface of, I don't know, this form here over the form, the color of the table. I don't know. It's even difficult to describe. And Sellars in the session 2 that I mentioned is so abstract. He's talking about this, specific language of sense data that people were trying to think of what is this language, because it's even difficult to describe what would be linguistically, what would be a sheer, pure sensing experience, because we have access to sensing experience from the standpoint of non-inferential beliefs. They are a component of non-inferential beliefs, but we don't have, we may have, maybe it's too strong to say we don't have access to sensings by themselves, but it's really hard, let us say, it's hard to isolate sensings from non-inferential beliefs. If you ask me, I will only give you non-inferential beliefs. Because even if I describe something that is a candidate of a sensational experience, not in the sense of a very good experience, but in the sense of an experience of sense datum. Yeah, I'll have, even if I describe it, by describing it, I will turn it into a non-inferential belief. Because if I have a vocabulary, for instance, that talks about patches of color and forms, and I describe the world with that vocabulary, well, I already chosen the vocabulary, and with that vocabulary, I'm describing states of affairs that are possibly captured by such a vocabulary. So it's non-inferential belief again, it's not really sensing. Sensing is that which conditions the fact that I'm able to talk, to describe this stuff as non-inferential beliefs. Are you getting? I'm not sure if I'm making myself clear.
Yes, I'm remembering all this stuff. Yes.
Oh.
Yes, I see that it is an issue, really. And one philosopher may say that there are physical, the physical objects should be out of the picture. The other philosopher would say that the sensing is mystical to talk about.
You're right. They would come with different solutions to this problem, but I would say, and I agree with Sellars, that the people who would say that the physical objects are out of the picture, they are wrong. I would say that. And I think Sellars says that, and Sellars is correct. Because it's out of a sheer axiomatic procedure. It's very difficult to come up with a cogent way of talking about sheer sensings. You can axiomatize it and say, I am describing with this and this and this and that. We've seen it in the Wittgenstein seminar, like the language game of the colored squares. You only have these colored squares. Describe stuff with these colored squares. Like, yeah, but you are stipulating the vocabulary.
Yeah, I can even come up with the vocabulary, but if the people would believe me, then the vocabulary would be successful. So we have beliefs either way.
Yeah, yeah, of course, you are communicating, but I think it's even more radical than that. It's not because just because you have to talk to other people.
Yeah,
It's because you have to talk to yourself. I think it's more radical than that, the problem. You have to talk to yourself. Is that because you have to give voice to that thinking in a linguistic sense.
Yeah.
So this is kind of ineffable in a certain sense, these sensings. you can study them. You can study sensings, though in the scientific sense. You can study from the third person point of view in a certain sense, right? Like not the sensing themselves, but the mechanism by which you can think that stimuli and response happen. This is not problematic, but the concept of sensing sense contents that the philosophers are using, or the concept of qualia, for instance, these are very problematic.
Qualia is problematic. For Sellars. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay.
Dilshad, nice to see you. Dilshad? No? Do you have a question, Dilshad? No, it's not there. Okay. I shall pursue then. So, yeah, I think you feel okay. So, on sensing and knowledge, acquired or unacquired abilities, then the issue is raised of what is acquired and unacquired in this sense of the given, in a certain sense. What is specific to sensings, it seems that it's unacquired. We shall say it's something that is part of the system that we are, and that respond to certain forms of stimuli and not to others, right? So second dichotomy, acquired or unacquired, then you have like the beautiful inconsistent triad that I presented so many times here, so you're already bored. So first sentence, S senses read sense content X entails S non-inferentially believes or knows that X is read. Exactly this, right? The arrow 2 here. The first sentence of the inconsistent triad is giving voice, is giving expression to a entailment relation between sensing of sense contents and non-inferential beliefs. But the problem is that the entailment is a logical entailment. So the entailment already presupposes non-inferential beliefs. You can't have the entailment from the point of view of sensing of sense contents. But here it is. If you accept S senses read sense content X entails S non-inferentially believes or knows that X is read. B, the ability to sense sense contents is unacquired, which is kind of common sense. C, the capacity to have classificatory beliefs of the form X is F is acquired. And you have to take C as classificatory beliefs are very simple, like this is blue. This is my asthma medication. This is blue, or I'm not sure if this is green or blue. I don't know. Whatever. But this is of a certain color. I see an object that is blue. I say this object is blue. This is a classificatory belief already, but it is attributing something that is in a certain sense an appearance to an object. So this is why you have like this boundary between the sensing of sense datum and the non-inferential beliefs, right? But then you have like this inconsistent triad, and the problem for Sellars is that sustaining two of the ideas entails rejecting one of them in pairs. Like if you sustain A and B, which means you sustain that there is an entailment relationship between sensing and non-inferential belief. And you sustain that you have the ability to sense contents as unacquired ability. You have to reject C, that the capacity to have classificatory beliefs is acquired. Because if the ability to sense contents already entails classificatory beliefs and the first is unacquired, you can't have C. Sustaining B and C implies negating A. So the ability to sense contents is unacquired, and the capacity to have classificatory beliefs of the form X is F is acquired. So you have like this division of labor between an unacquired thing and an acquired thing, which means A does not hold. You can't have A, because A says that automatically having one entails the other. And sustaining A and C implies negating B. If you sustain that the entailment relation between sensible contents and non-inferential beliefs, and that the capacity to have classificatory beliefs is acquired, you have to reject B. The ability to sense contents is unacquired. So the problem hinges on the transmission of a justificatory chain between sensing and knowing. Of course, A is the problem. Sellars differentiate between causal chains and justificatory chains. If it is possible to sense facts, then sensible contents have propositional form, and we are capturing a given. So this is a kind of Platonism that you can build in one of the solutions to the trilemma. But Sellars rejects A then, conserves B and C, right? Which is his answer to this issue right there, the second arrow here. Okay. And then he says, it certainly begins to look as though the classical concept of a sense datum were a mongrel resulting from a crossbreeding of two ideas. One, the idea that there are certain inner episodes, sensations of red or of C sharp, which can occur to human beings and brutes without any prior process of learning or concept formation. Therefore, they are unacquired. Sensations are unacquired, and without which it would, in some sense, be impossible to see, for example, that the facing surface of a physical object is red and triangular, or hear that a certain physical sound is C sharp. Okay? And the second idea, the idea that there are certain inner episodes which are the non-inferential knowings, that certain items are, for example, red or C sharp. And these episodes are the necessary conditions of empirical knowledge as providing the evidence for all other empirical propositions. The problem is, if you have an evidential relationship between one proposition and the next, you have to be already in the realm of knowledge. You have a non-inferential knowledge because these are knowledge of stuff that you don't arrive through inference, but by being knowledge, they are already the mobilization of concepts of a vocabulary that enable the move from A to B, the inferential move from A to B to C to D. Whereas pure sensation seems to be severed from these inferential relations, right? And the idea of a sense datum then, according to Sellars, is this kind of crossbreeding between these two. We have something that is given immediate with no necessity for full-fledged conceptuality. At the same time, these are the foundations of the conceptual edifice. So this is the problem, the main problem of a given here, right there. And according to Sellars' argument, you can't have it. You can't have it both ways. And then you have the necktie shop argument, which is kind of funny. The guy sees the ties, you all read it, right? Like the guy sees, you change the lighting. He works in the shop, and they change the lighting of the shop, and the lighting change the color, of course, of the ties. And the guy does not understand that the color is a product of the relationship between the tie and the lighting. And then you have this kind of funny dialogue right there, like, let us suppose now that at his point in the story, electric lighting is invented. His friends and neighbors rapidly adopt this new means of illumination and wrestle with the problems it presents. John, however, is the last to succumb. Just after just after it has been installed in his shop, one of his neighbors, Jim, comes in to buy a necktie. Here's a handsome green one, says John. But it isn't green, says Jim, and takes John outside. Well, says John, it was green in there, but now it is blue. No, says Jim, you know that neckties don't change their color merely as a result of being taken from place to place. But perhaps electricity changes their color and they change back again in daylight. That would be a queer kind of change, wouldn't it, says Jim. I suppose so, says bewildered John, but we saw that it was green in there. So, of course, this is kind of funny, not too funny, but a little bit funny. But 50s humor, right? Yeah, there's a bite to the argument. Like Sellars mentioned some philosophers that drop the appeal to sense data. Instead, count and see physical objects as fundamentals in their ontology. They still appeal, even that's badly written there, still appeal to appearances as fundamental, keeping with the foundationalist picture of knowledge that justifies the appeal to the given. So the idea is that even if you do not think of sense data as fundamental, you may think of physical objects as fundamental, you still think of look, the vocabulary, the language game of looks as more fundamental than the language game of is, right? So this is the discussion here. Is green more fundamental or less fundamental than looks green or looks red or looks blue? This is the discussion. So the necktie shop argument intends to undermine the idea of the logical primacy of looks talk over being talk. So Sellars says that actually the simpler language game and more fundamental one is that to say that it is green. So this is what's at stake here. And there is a nice way into the space of reasons in this argument, in this session, that I will explore. That is this idea. If we bear in mind that such sentences as this is green have both a fact stating and a reporting use. So Sellars differentiates between a fact stating and reporting. Reporting is a technical term. I think it comes from Schlick. I think Lieke was asking from whom it was coming, these terms. I think reporting is Schlick, if I'm not mistaken. Which is a reporting of an experience. Reporting is that, it's a technical term. It means I'm reporting that I'm feeling hot now. It's really, really hot here in Rio. Not that I'm hot, I feel warm, you understood. The fact stating that says something is true. So by differentiating between the reporting and the fact stating, Sellars uses this notion of Gilbert Ryle to say that to fact state, the fact stating use is an achievement expression, achievement word to say, I saw that it was green or it was blue, meaning that it is a candidate to truth. By being a candidate to truth, you are endorsing it. And by endorsing it, you are entering into the space of reason. Here is not a Sellars argument necessarily. I'm just using this nice passage to say, you see, like here, you have like this entrance point to this whole pragmatic inferential infrastructure that is the infrastructure of the space of reasons that comes in with a pure, simple language game of saying that the necktie is green, because you have to endorse that it is green if you say, not that you have to endorse, you are endorsing that it is green if you say that it is green. So Sellars' idea here is that the correct way to analyze truthful expression is in terms of an achievement expression. Therefore, there is a normative element embedded in it. And therefore, there is an endorsement element. You are engaged in this process of committing yourself to the truth of a certain expression. Whereas looks green is a kind of withdrawal. You are withdrawing the truth of the matter and saying, perhaps it is green, but I'm not committing myself to the fact that it is green. It only looks green, right? So he's inverting the primacy here, and inverting the primacy through a certain kind of a semantic argument that, you know, to understand is green, S sees that the tree is green, means that S endorses that the tree is green, right? I pointed out above that when we use the word see as in see, S sees that the tree is green, we are not only ascribing a claim to the experience that you are seeing that you see green in the tree, okay, let us say that this is the experience, but endorsing that the tree is green. It is this endorsement which Ryle has in mind when he refers to seeing that something is thus and so as achievement, and to seize as an achievement word. I prefer to call it so it is, or just so word, for the root idea is that of truth. To characterize S's experience as a seeing is, in a suitably broad sense, which I shall be concerned to explicate, to apply the semantical concept of truth to that experience. Right. So these were the sections that I asked. The third one, the necktie, is a kind of a polemic against not the phenomenalists, but as Aaron was saying, maybe the phenomenologists or the physicalists that nevertheless still think of appearances as primordial, par rapport to the way things are. But to say what it is, also by analyzing this semantical problem, you gain a way in, like the portal to the idea that to affirm something truthfully is to commit oneself to the affirmation. So you have a way into the space of reasons in that sense. And then you have this whole area of, candidates to truth that you either endorse or not, which are in the conceptual sphere. And you have this other causal sphere of, sensings or stimuli that have a certain response, differential response from the systems that we are. What is the relationship between those? This is the problem. And the given, in that sense, in the sense of the epistemic given that Sellars is analyzing here in this text, is a kind of an attempt at responding this issue, this problem. In addition to this epistemic form of the given, there's this categorial form of the given. This is not as developed in Sellars as the epistemic form in empiricism and philosophy of mind. This comes from the foundations of the metaphysics of pure processes, the Caron's lectures, which is a later text by Sellars from the 80s already. So he says, if a person is directly aware of an item which has categorical status, C, then the person is aware of it as having categorical status C. This principle is perhaps the most basic form of what I have castigated as the myth of the given. To reject the myth of the given is to reject the idea that the categorical structure of the world, if it has a categorical structure, imposes itself on the mind as a seal imposes itself on melted wax. So the idea is of this transparency between the categorical form that the world is and what the mind makes of what the world is. This is maybe what he says here, at least if we are to believe Sellars here in this text, the most basic form of what he says is the given. But it is also something that we can reserve as particularly as a particular kind of the given, which is the categorical one. Like the categories of the world are transparent to the mind. Whereas if you reject the given, actually the categorical structure of the world is to be painstakingly tested and constructed out of the logical resources of the mind through a test and run process in a certain sense. And this is why this is kind of this is part of Sellars' conception of science, for instance, the idea of different successive frameworks, right? That each one has a certain categorical structure a certain collection of fundamental objects, and so on. So there's an interesting result of the critique of the given is that the world underdetermines what is to be thought of it. So you have like this leeway of coming up with conceptual schemes that arrange stuff in certain ways, right? That are not directly, purely given by the way things are. Actually, the way things are include the interaction, the interactive nature of this cognitive agent, of the relationship between this cognitive agent and that which is being given to know, right? And this has everything to do now. Now we are in a juncture that has everything to do with the Marx paragraph now. Aaron?
Well, I asked this question in the chat earlier and got some good responses, but I'm curious what you would say also about it. Because when I look at this definition of a categorial given, my mind goes to sort of Hegel's logic and the sort of reformulations of it by Sebastian Rudel, right? That knowing is knowing yourself to know, that knowledge is this kind of self-transparent in some ways, reflect like that knowing is self-consciousness, and that self-consciousness is knowing, and whether you think that sort of is a form of the given, whether that's a kind of limit
I'm not,
it's not an item, right? Like knowing yourself to like directing yourself toward your own thought isn't an item in the world, so it's not. I don't know. I'm somewhat sympathetic to Rudel, but still trying to grapple with.
Yeah,
that.
I'm not that familiar with Rudel. I know the fundamentals of the argument, and if I'm not mistaken, it's fairly Hegelian, right? But it has to come through a process. It's like a realization that comes through a process, right? Like the idea that absolute knowing is empirical knowing. Isn't that like this basic idea? But the process is a process of defeat, right? Of a certain pretension. And only through the process of defeat of the pretension, you come to understand that absolute knowing is empirical knowing, because there's nothing behind what is there to know. But I think this is orthogonal to what is being said here in a certain sense, because even if you accept Rudol's idea, this does not entail that the only way to specifically categorize what there is to know is the way that you currently do. Because there are other ways that you are defeated in trying to do because they are impossible, but there are other ways that you are not defeated in trying to do. So I think it's not incompatible necessarily.
That's great. Yeah, that's helpful.
But I'm not sure if it's correct, because I'm not that familiar with Rudel. If it says like the way that we know the world is the way the world is because it's the way the world is in the absence of the knower, I think he's wrong. But if the way the world is the way we know the world is in the presence of a knower, it's almost tautological. So this tautology holds a truth that is an absolute truth. So it seems that logically is sound what he says, but it does not. It doesn't have the power to negate what is being said here in the Sellarsian sense.
Could you give some examples then of categorical givens?
Categorical.
Yeah.
I'm having trouble giving an example. I say you why. I say why I have a trouble, because the idea of a categorical given is not. I'm not sure it's something that is able to be exemplified as much as is a certain attitude to what is perceived as being the case. For instance, we may agree. Let us say something. Let me say something here that is less controversial. For instance, a good example of a categorical given. A categorical given is not an item to be exemplified so much as it is a belief about items. For instance, a very popular Jordan Peterson, for instance, is a perfect example of somebody that believes in a categorical given in a certain sense. When he says that we live in the world of meaning, and for instance, biological realities of lobsters have bearing upon the categories that he used to understand the world in a certain sense. This is a form of a categorical given in a certain sense. Like there is something that is already there in the world that is saying to us how we ought to categorize that which is made to appear. Or biological essentialisms, for instance, usually fall in that sphere of categorical givens. When you are very essentialist, very essentialist, biological essentialist, very radical biological essentialist, for example. These are examples of categorical givens in a certain sense. But you see, these are more attitudes towards categorizations, because you may, for instance, countenance the difference, the biological difference between male and female, biological difference, without saying that these entails that there are only male and female performances or male and female identities, for instance, right? It's not really the item necessarily, the statement that may be true or false. It's actually a certain attitude towards how you gain knowledge of that statement. For instance, the classical idea of the categorical given is, for instance, the Aquinas kind of argument that the world is made for the knowledge of man, made by God for the knowledge of man. So this guarantees that what we see is what it is. So this is the enemy here. I think this clarifies a bit, because it's a hard question to give an example, because it's not really the item that exemplifies so much as how you take the item to be and what role the item is playing that exemplifies a categorical given in that sense. It's because this is the way the world is. Yeah, but this is predicated in what you make of it in the logical sense, and also what we make of it in our social, political, ethical sense as well, right? But anyway, there are, but I feel that I'm trying to exemplify this to you, but in doing so, I'm already kind of joining a lot of different kinds of categorical givens together. This is the problem that I'm having with my own examples. Perhaps there would be like an ethical categorical given, a scientific categorical given, or different types, even of categorical givens, right? But yeah, Dilshad, again, are you there now for your question?
Hi, sorry, my phone just froze. Hello, hi. Yeah, just relevant to our discussion, I think Rosenberg accuses McDowell of some sort of categorical given, because, you know, McDowell in his conceptualism, you know, some sort of experiential conceptualism says that
I have this problem with McDowell myself.
Yeah, you know, all, for example, all representational content is conceptual content, and we have direct openness to the world, you know, his exact phrase. You know, Rosenberg said, you know, if this is not categorical given, I don't know what it is.
It's more subtle than that. Like, we have conceptual openness to the world means a specific thing in.
Yeah, I know, especially later McDowell in having the world in view, he has radically changed his view. But, you know, my question was actually regarding the logic of looks. When, you know, I think it was point 15 or 16, when he talks about the difference between this is green and this looks green. He says that, how can I put it? He says that, you know, when something is green, it's some sort of endorsement, but something looks green is some sort of endorsement withholding commitment. So the sense data theorist, it cannot be a foundation of knowledge because it's not an assertion of some sort, but it's an assertion withholding commitment. Versus,
yeah, I see what you mean. I think Sellars is onto exactly that in a certain sense, because Sellars operates in the following way. This is what makes this a difficult text. He's not really offering blank rebuttals, blank refutations. He's offering Trojan horses. So the principle of a Trojan horse is like you have to show why it is that such a view was plausible. And when you do that, in a certain sense, you are giving credence to your enemy. And when it says, of course, it's because you are withholding commitment, but endorsing that it looks green is it's endorsing without commitment, right? It seems to be that then you are at something that requires less than full commitment, right? And this is why this is more certain. This gives credence to the given. Like it's more certain to say that it looks green than that it is green, because to say that it is green, you have to go there and do experiments and change the lighting and see in what conditions it is green. In the standard conditions, is it green, right? Whereas it looks green, it seems to be less and to entail less belief. And this, of course, gives credence to the philosopher of the given. But at the same time, he's saying, look, this language game of saying it looks green is a parasitic language game. You have to know to say that, how to say that something is green under certain standard conditions, because you don't have any other way to learn that than to, in a certain set of conditions, look at colored objects and attribute colors to them in order to be able to say that it looks in a certain way. So from the pragmatic perspective point of view, the language game of saying it looks and withholding belief and commitment to the truth of it is more complex. It has more parts. It is more expensive economically in the economy, in the logical economy. I like to think of logic in terms and pragmatics in terms of a certain form of economy. It's less actually economical to say, it's less economical to say it looks green than to say it is green. It is green, you learn first, and you only learn it looks green because you know how to say it is green. And this is basically the basic form of the argument. So the primacy, then, you can do still endorsement without commitment. This is the Trojan horse. You can do that. But the role it plays is not the role that the sense data theorists or the appearance theorists wants it to play. Because genetically, you can't have that without the other.
Yeah, I understood all of the point. Thank you. But I don't see why it gives aid and comfort to his own phrase to the sense data theorist. Yeah, I think he in the sense of incorrigibility, exactly. I think he gives more credit to sense data theorists in the sense that you can be wrong about what you see, but you cannot. Because something that merely looks something, you cannot be wrong about that. Yes, exactly. But because of it's an endorsement withholding commitment, it cannot be this kind of locution cannot be an epistemic foundation. That's the I think the sharp end of the argument.
That's interesting because it strikes me that the idea of endorsing without commitment is basically phenomenological epoche, right? Like you cannot doubt that. It's not that you cannot doubt that the object looks red, because I think there's too much in saying the object looks red already. But you cannot doubt that you have a red sensation, or a sensation of red. Okay, but you can doubt that the object you see is red. So you're actually changing from the natural attitude to the phenomenological attitude, right? In that sense, just a comment. It never struck me like this also, this is a good description of phenomenological epoche, actually. Yeah, anyway, sorry, this is kind of an aside. Sorry, Divishan. But was there another question? I think I answered. I'm not sure if I answered.
From my question?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was, I just needed some clarifications.
Okay.
Because I think there's a similarity between the looks talk being parasitic on is talk or being talk, as well as the non-inferential belief being parasitic on the inferential ones. Because when we say this is green as a non-inferential observational report, for example, you have to know. You have implicit, to put in Brandomian terms, you have implicit normative governance of the observational report as well, because this is green implies that what green is. You make moves from demonstrable to demonstrates, from being color to being green, etc., etc.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I thought there's a similarity between these two.
Right.
Non-inferential.
Yeah, exactly. That's completely right.
And I think there is another point that when you say it looks green, you not only withdraw from the truth, you can, there is a second case when you say it looks green and you mean that it is blue. When you negate that it is green. Can it be so?
I don't understand. How you, I don't understand. Sorry, Nika.
No? Well, just from the usage of those words, it looks. If I say if instead of saying that it is green, I say that it only looks green, I may mean that it is that it isn't green.
Okay, I see. You say it looks green. It looks green is not. I understand. I think. Let me see if I understand. You have to say, if I say it looks green, I'm not only saying that it is a candidate to be green, but I'm saying that it is not green. It only looks green because it is not green. So there's a negation of the phatic character of the sentence. Like you are negating that it is green, actually, by saying it looks green. Yeah, I see.
Yeah, it may be it just as an extra interpretation.
Okay. So approaching the end. So there's a bunch of stuff. But yeah, I'll try to speed up now and get to what get down to business. So so you have like another canonical understanding of the given has become William DeVries, right? Like he's very good. He has a very good definition of what kind of cross-breeding is that the Sellars is trying to describe. So he says the given is epistemically independent. That is, whatever positive epistemic status our cognitive encounter of the object has, it does not depend on the epistemic status of any other cognitive state. We can parse this in linguistic terms, like a non-inferential belief is the belief that you don't arrive through inferring from any other belief, right? Which means it's the same that he's saying. It does not depend on the epistemic status of any other cognitive state. Notice that epistemic independence does not follow from immediacy, not being inferred from other knowledge, unless the only form of epistemic dependence is actual inference. It is epistemically efficacious, that is, it can transmit positive epistemic status to other cognitive states. So the problem is it has to be epistemically independent on one side and epistemically efficacious at the same time. This is the given. DeVries, for me, actually solved what is the given better than Sellars. Like, this is the best definition for me. Epistemically independent and yet epistemically efficacious at the same time. Like, it is severed from the inferential fabric, but at the same time, it has to serve as premise in the inferential fabric, which is impossible. So here we are now capable of expressing more thoroughly our problem. It is usually accepted that there are at least two forms of a given to be criticized in Sellars, the epistemic and the categorical givens, at least two. The epistemic form of the given corresponds to the idea of something that is both epistemically independent and efficacious, meaning it is something that is not the result of previous cognitive states while transmitting positive epistemic status to other cognitive states of ours. The second is the idea that the categorial structure of the world, if it has a categorical structure, imposes itself on the mind as a seal imposes on an image on melted wax. Rejecting both forms of the given yields a distinctive division of labor between sensible contents and conceptual workings in the Sellarsian picture. So here we have like this problem of the second arrow there, this nice little horrible doodling that I did, that with the idea of cognitive friction. So you have to have something that is going on between the sensings and the non-inferential beliefs that account for cognitive friction that is able to make these communicate in a certain sense, right? And be able to place an item in the space of reasons, an item that has within it a sensing, a certain form of sensing. Just to finish up, Aaron, just real quick before we go on. And then there is this McDowellian interpretation. I take this from the Evans paper, actually, because it was more well-rounded than in the McDowell, actually. But if one cannot have an individual concept without having more than that individual concept, then a concept cannot fulfill one of the conditions of a given. No concept can be independent of other cognitive states because all concepts necessarily rely on other concepts. This suggests that there is to be a given. If there is to be a given, it must be a non-conceptual given. Or so instead of a concept of gene, we might try to found knowledge on the immediate visual appearance of colorless liquid. But this given would fail to fulfill the other condition of the given, that it justify further cognitive states. This is because Sellars and those who follow him take rationality, judgments, inferences, concept usage to be normative and not just causal. Thought is not merely causal, it is not what Brandon calls a reliable differential response disposition. For this reason, Sellars claims the attempt to analyze statements about knowledge into statements about non-epistemic facts is a radical mistake. So there can be neither a conceptual nor a non-conceptual given. But then what does our rationality involve? How do we know things? We seem to be thrown back on the position that the external world cannot provide us with reasons at all, or that it cannot constrain us, as if I could Christ-like transform the water in my bottle into gin simply by altering my concepts. John McDowell has argued that philosophers get caught in this oscillation between appeals to the given and claims of coherentism. So this is an interesting twist that McDowell does on the argument that is expresses it as this oscillation, where sometimes we want to appeal to something that is given because we want to have that cognitive friction, right? That relationship between the sensing and the belief. And sometimes we withdraw from that and go back to coherentism, but then we risk falling into a frictionless spinning in the void. We are talking, but we are not talking about anything. Concepts only refer to concepts, and where does it hinges upon the world? This is a McDowellian twist on this, which is, I think, clarifying. This bit of McDowell I like a lot. I had also a little bit of the problem that Dilshad was mentioning, that McDowell's solution is to say that the world is already conceptually structured, and in a certain sense, it seems that he falls into a certain form of a given, because then, if everything we come into contact has its own concept already, it seems that we fall back onto the given. But he has a certain set of answers. I'm not sure they are super successful or not within even a mind and world yet. But yeah, this is a bit beside the point. We are approaching the end. So I just want to finish and then give the floor to the presentations before we finish the session, to express the issue of the seminar and which will connect with the object of next session, which is the idea of real abstraction, right? On the other hand, the idea of real abstraction, as proposed within the Marxian tradition, skews traditional divisions between the mental and the real, the abstract and the concrete, the sensible and the conceptual, committing to a causally efficacious figure of abstraction that is the form of the thought previous and external to the thought, in the Zizekian expression, which amounts to a veritable expropriation of abstract thought in the Toscano expression. So the problem is that real abstraction seems to be a very specific form of a given within all that we were discussing, because it's something that happens outside of the head. And the idea of Zonhettel is that it gets transmitted to the head, but it emerges out of sheer social practice. So how come that is the case? If you're a Platonist, that's not a problem. The Platonists amongst us, I won't discuss with you guys because you have this solved, but I'm not a Platonist. And if I'm exposing Sellars so much, is because I want to see the conditions under which such an idea can be compatibilized within the Sellarsian framework as a kind of intervention in that debate that Ray Brassier, as I was mentioning in the beginning of the session, initiated between Marx and Sellars. And a few other people are wondering about, right? So here's just one possible expression of the thesis of real abstraction. The origin of commodity abstraction is, according to Marx's determination, in a sphere which completely escapes the conceptual language of metaphysical thought. The latter relates things back to consciousness and consciousness to things. There is no third option. Conversely, the social relation from which the value abstraction is derived does not fit into the dichotomy of things and consciousness. Within the framework of traditional concepts, the phenomenon of the abstraction commodity is an absurdity, something which quite simply cannot exist. It's, as Marx determines, a spatial-temporal process, causal in nature. However, its result is an abstraction, that is, an effect of a conceptual nature. Between the spatial-temporal world of things and the ideal world of concepts, metaphysical thought does not tolerate any common element. These are antinomically separated spheres. However, according to Marx, the abstraction commodity is commodity abstraction. Sorry, this is a badly inverted translation there. Commodity abstraction is precisely constructed as belonging in both spheres. This is precisely what makes it special. And this is from Warenform and Denkform, which I love. It's even better than what's in the book, but it's in German, and I have it in German and in French, so you know. But you know, it's very striking. The way he puts it there is very forceful, right? That the real abstraction is this kind of heresy from the standpoint of traditional empiricism, but also Sellars is a critic of traditional empiricism. And it remains to be shown how much of a heresy it is also for Sellars, and in what conditions, under what conditions can such a thing be countenanced within a Sellarsian critique of the given, a framework that performs the Sellarsian critique of the given. Okay, this is the project. I think we can. I don't think we need to read thesis 2. I'll leave it to next session and just finish up. So our preliminary question concerning real abstractions is the following. If real abstractions are in the mind but not of it, the question of its transmission to the mind arises. A, if the real abstraction is something that happens independently of cognition, it seems to causally constrain behavior, which doesn't entail being in a justificatory relation to other contents. B, if the real abstraction is in a justificatory relation, which means has categorical status, it can't be something that emerges independently of cognition, simplicity, no cognition involved. Of course, my solution would be to say that there is cognition involved in real abstraction from the beginning, and real abstraction is just a modulation of the space of justification. But anyway, this has to be fleshed out. So continuing, if A is true, then real abstraction can't do the further work Zonhatter wants it to do, to be the origin of the categories of the understanding in the Kantian sense. If B is true, then a specific division of labor has to obtain between sensibility and cognition for it to take hold. Our solution will try and find a juncture between thinking and doing that would vindicate B. By doing so, it will also be compatible with A in the sense of accepting real abstractions as constraints upon behavior in the causal sense, but with a specific set of caveats. So this is a statement of the project as it is done in the paper, and we will, as I said, branch out to the specifics of these different areas that this paper is weaving together. Okay. I think maybe we should have presentations before we wrap up. Icaro, are you there?
Me?
No, the new center, Icaro.
Sorry, I'm here.
Just do we have like 10 little more minutes for wrapping up, just to have the presentations?
Yes, I guess we started 10 minutes late.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, you know the drill. We'll have the presentations. Lika, go on.
My name is Lika. I'm from Russia. I live in Moscow. I'm trying to become a philosopher, and I have a blog called Minecraft Philosophy. The question that I will try to elaborate is there a positive component of learning, whether cognitive or other type of learning, in playing computer games like Minecraft? And yes, okay. I'm trying to do this through the issues that we're talking about. Brandom, maybe critique of Brandom in the end of it. But yeah, the seminar is very helpful, and the readings, they gave a lot of ideas to me.
Just an aside, we'll probably soon we'll be having the subset in the STP, the meetings. We'll have Conrad Hamilton there, and he will be talking about a Marxist approach to gaming. If you're interested, Lika, so I can invite you to watch. It's about real abstraction and games. So yeah. For those who don't know, I'm sorry, I know I said you know the drill, but these are because there's a lot of already ancient students here. Usually we are just asking for you to present yourself, say what you're researching and what are usually your interest in this seminar in particular, just real quick. Okay. Juan, can you do it?
Hello. Yes. Hello everyone. I am Juan Toro. Yeah, I have studied in Vienna philosophy and part semester, but not really to end. Then I was in Spain. I am in Spain currently studying practical philosophy in the UNED University, but I am interested in this. I think that what interests me is working with the idea of the complexity. Yes, for now I agree with the ideas of Sellars. Maybe I don't know, but I like this a little this perspective about yeah. But for me, it's more in sense of arts. I am an artist. I have a fine art study, and maybe I need all this interesting terminology in science from this schizoanalytical points of view and this post-apocalyptic way of the fiction arts, fictions in sense from fine arts on painting, on contemporary arts and aesthetics. Yes, and I am happy here to hear on all people to know. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Juan. Alan Diaz.
Yes, Philip. Sorry.
Sorry?
Alan Diaz.
Yeah, I'm Alan. I'm from Mexico, but currently in Germany doing a PhD. And yeah, my topic is mostly Marxist theory about technology, and more specifically, certain authors that try to find, you could say, structural isomorphisms. I mean, like structural isomorphisms and historical continuity between real abstraction and digital abstraction. So yeah, that's one here. It's quite
real abstraction and what?
Digital abstraction.
Digital abstraction. Interesting. Great. Thank you, Alan. Yeah, so it's completely explained why you're here. Thank you. Luca?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Caron again. So my name is Luca. I am a student of art and curatorial practice here at New Center. And this is my first year. I'm a performance artist, and in short, I was very much interested in this seminar, and I am reading currently, even before the seminar has started, and I saw the syllabus a bit again this Zizek'ian object of sublime ideology, and as well as his thoughts about post-traumatic subject. And yeah, I'm in general have curiosity about real abstraction, and happy to dive a little bit more into it. Thank you.
Thank you. Aaron?
Sure. Hi, I'm Aaron. I'm coming from New York. My background is in history and German studies, so I'm sort of dilettantish when it comes to philosophy, though I've been at this for a while. It's all sort of self-directed. And I guess I would just say I'm here because I'm very interested in this kind of post-Sellarsian Marxism project, very interested in Sellars' practical philosophy, and the way that a kind of expanded concept of practical reason and thick normativity can be used to enrich Marxism. And I guess coming from Carl's last class, I'm a bit skeptical of Zonrettel, but here to be convinced otherwise of the value of real abstraction and these concepts, and that we can do something with them but I'll sort of repeat my initial judgment, and we'll see if it changes by the end. But my initial judgment from my first reading from Carl's class this summer was that it kind of puts forward a sort of romantic almost Heideggerian anti-capitalism rather than a full-fledged Marxian one, the sort of reunion of head and hand stuff. So that's my prejudice, and we'll see if in 4 weeks.
Yeah, I invite you to read. I invite you to read part 3 of the book, where Taylorism is the hero. So this is completely anti-Heideggerian.
Interesting. Great.
Yeah. Mr. Slav.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mr. Slav. I'm PhD in philosophy, basically from Kiev, Ukraine, but now residing in Funchal, Madeira, Portugal. And my interest in this seminar is manifold. Firstly, I would say that for a long time I've been fascinated by this concept, myth of the given, to the extent that it has actually inspired me on creation of my own 2 concepts, myth of the oracle and myth of things to come, to criticize dogmatic orthodoxic Marxism. The second reason is perhaps my self-development of my political eye, so to say, because although I think that I'm definitely Marxist, I cannot tell for sure what kind of Marxist am I. So for a long time I've been dealt with post-Soviet Marxism because of my origin with, and also with the link of some non-dogmatic Marxism. Then I was engaged with French interpretation of Marxism, but for the last 2 years about that, I'm trying to broaden my horizons and to just to dive into the Anglo-American Marxism and to analytical Hegelianism and so on. And perhaps the last reason of my engagement is because of my engagement of French thought. I also wonder how much Pierre Bourdieu's notion of historical a prioris as quasi-transcendental structures imposed on an individual by power and state are aligned with Sellars' notion of the given, actually. And as well, the same is for the notion of abstraction, how much it aligns with Guattari's notion of infinitives, which I have coined from the book I'm currently reading, Anti-Oedipus Papers by Guattari. So, yes, that's it.
That's very thorough. Thank you, Mr. Slav. Tom here.
Hello. Yeah, I'm an artist, writer, researcher based in Uppsala in Sweden, and I'm currently doing a PhD from distance. So I'm doing a PhD at Newcastle University in the UK, but I live in Sweden. And my the topic of my project is, it's a kind of interdisciplinary art project which looks at collaborative kind of musical practices and improvisation, and brings it together with these kind of reflexive prose writing that I call fiction theory writing and performance philosophy, and it aims to sort of create and inhabit, I suppose, and speculate on a very specific character that has been part of my practice for about 10 years. I've been specifically focusing on this character that I've been constructing. And what brings me, I suppose, to the course is that the sort of source material for this construction is, I'm specifically looking at Ray Brassey's work, but more specifically than that, 3 talks that he gave in 2015 at PATH in France, Performing Arts Forum in France, that I've been going through quite meticulously. And I think much of or certainly one of them, if not all 3 of these lectures, connect with the topics that I think we'll be going through in the course.
Yeah, I know them. They're great, these lectures. Yeah. These are pirate materials. Well, Vitor, thank you, Tom.
No problem.
Vitor Mello.
Hello, I'm Vitor, a clinical psychologist and writer from Brazil. And currently my interest is laid on the relationship between literature and psychology. And now I'm reading especially the work of Brazilian critic Luis Costa Lima, from whom the concept of representation is very important for this relationship. So I participated in some encounters on CPC in reading of some Reto mediated by GP, but I couldn't keep up the pace of reading and of meetings, so I don't get it to the end. And I hope to get it back, because the concepts we discussed are really interesting for me, and I believe get a lot from my research. So it's it.
Thank you, Victor. It's always good to have the CPC voted in these situations. Gio Lingao, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Hello, I am Gio Lingao. I'm from the Philippines. I'm a filmmaker, and right now the current focus of my practice is Filipino violence and terrorism. It's a a reaction to the passing of the anti-terror law in the Philippines, a law which enables the government to red tag anyone out of mere suspicion. And I experienced this myself last year after the Philippine elections, actually. And I'm working on 2 projects, like building upon the footage I had retrieved, actually, because they asked me to delete the footage that I was that I recorded. I was trying to retrace the march of an indignation rally. This is actually after the rally. The rally is already over, and the idea just came to me to retrace the march from where the voting was being held, and to the cultural center of the Philippines. So it kind of like struck me in a way. So they asked me to delete the files, so I retrieved it, and I also have a footage after the harassment / interrogation. Yeah. And I'm just curious how the seminar is going to inform this.
So you're in art and curatorial practice here in the new center.
Transdisciplinary studies.
Transdisciplinary. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Great.
I forgot.
Great. Thank you. Oh, that's great. Great. Diego.
Hi, my name is Diego Moreno. I am Colombian. I'm making my PhD on the philosophy of history of Friedrich Schlegel. Formerly, I work on Husserl, phenomenology of space, philosophy of behavior. I guess that this is the main interest I have in Sellars' work. And also, I'm very curious about the relationships you can make between this Marxist Pittsburghian school and the new work critique. I mean, the work of Jappe and Kurtz sounds very interesting for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael or Michael? I'm not sure if it's Michael or Michael. Michael?
I think that's me. I'm Michael. I'm in the critical philosophy program, although I had to take a break most of this year because of some health problems, which means unfortunately I missed both of Reza's last 2 seminars, where I suspect I would have found myself in the minority with respect to psychoanalysis and the status of the unconscious, which for me is a pretty important lens and has been, I think, very productive with regards to the real abstraction. And that interest comes from a sort of concern with figuring out how a mind changes and what that means, and how it can kind of become, how a mind can become more, I don't know, philosophically rigorous and whatever. which in itself comes from an interest in critical pedagogy and organizing. So I have tried to combine kind of Marxism, cybernetics, and psychoanalysis as a kind of, I don't know, a way to do things. I don't really care about being right, but as a way to do things and change minds. So for that reason, Sonrethel is like very, very interesting to me.
Thank you, Michael. It's very interesting. I know some people that might want to discuss with you. Regis.
Hi, everyone. Sorry for my video. It has some glitches and things. I don't know why. I'm a PhD student based in São Paulo. I studied Hegel on my master's. I'm still studying Hegel's logic. Actually, the relation between nature and spirit mediated by life. So I'm very interested in actually it is also like a project on Hegel's materialism. So I'm studying a little bit of Marx right now. Also, I participated on CPC group with Caron, where we read also Zonrettel, but I entered only at the end of the reading. So I'm eager to go back and read a little bit more and read Caron's article that I'm sorry I didn't read it yet, but now I have the time for it. That's it.
That's okay. That's okay. It's like in your computer, like for the last 3 months, but it's fine. Thanks, Daryl.
Hello. I've been in the New Center courses for a bit of time now, about 6 to 8 courses. My background is interdisciplinary studies. I'm retired, so I'm also using this as a way to keep my mind sharp. Some of what I've been interested in is probably pretty broad spectrum continental philosophy with a heavy dose of Badiou and a strong sympathy to mathematical ontology. But I guess taking the New Center courses, I see that there's a lot of exposure to Sellars. And so I need to kind of wrap my head around why the interest is so strong there relative to where I've been pursuing. I guess as a question from reading Sellars so far is, I'm struggling to understand why people will be in Sellars' camp relative to the critique of the myth of the given, yet remain, how they rationalize that with a naturalism. I'm not sure I understand how you can hold both those thoughts together, but I'm hoping to get some insight from this course.
That's a good question that you put, and I'm familiar with the wonder that Badiouians feel towards the interest in Sellars, but that's funny always. It's almost an inside joke there. Sorry, but thank you a lot. Thank you. Good to have you here. Dilshad.
Yeah, hi, my name is Dilshad. I'm a doctor, dermatologist. I have no background in philosophy, actually, but I have been reading, left-wing Sellarsians for quite some time, especially Brandom and Rorty. So my version of Sellars is quite a Brandomized version. So recently I have been starting to read, especially early Sellars, his papers from 1948, I think, Epistemology and the New Way of Words, Realism and the New Way of Words. I just finished these 2 papers a few weeks ago. So in terms of Marxism, I consider myself politically as a leftist, but my understanding, compared to my understanding of, Sellars and the crew, my understanding of Marxism is a little bit immature, actually. So what I hope to get from this course is a bit understanding of where I stand from
from a Marxist perspective.
Thanks, Dilshad. Jeff, good to have you back.
Yeah. Hey, Jeff Parat. I'm right now in Toronto, from the States, Boston. I'm an artist, and I've been interested in the what I see as persistent and limiting meaning structures in art. And so sort of looking at art through the lens of as a normative language game has been helpful to kind of critique that and to look historically and materially into the origins of that. And this idea of real abstraction has sort of come up in my research parallel to that. And I'm sort of thinking art as a real abstraction as well and seeing the compatibility of those two things. Yeah, I think that's all I want to say. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. Eduardo?
Hi, can you hear me? Can you hear me? No? So my name is Eduardo. I'm an artist and researcher based in São Paulo, Brazil. My interest in the seminar is because I also was part of the group which read Intellectual and Manual Labor last year. And I was very surprised on how Sonhetto works with Kant. Instead of going through the Hegelian route, bringing Kant back is a very interesting move and opens up many different ways to look on how we can talk about ideology. And I'm going to bring a lot of things which aren't really pure abstraction, but ideology, alienation, overdetermination, all of these things are closely knitted. And how he treats them is very specific because of this sort of coupling that he makes. Recently, I was in a class with Julia Kristeva, and I talked about our research on CPC, and she said, well, there's a very interesting thing which you're bringing, which is to bring an objection to the idea of the subject in Marx, which is usually a unity. So these are two opposing points of view, but there are ground to work with them. So I'm more or less, as Michael, interested in process of ontogeny, to think of the subject through Kristeva and Freud and etc., and how this can be taught along with real abstraction and similar concepts. Also, me, Lika, and Anna are working together and to make a new sort of feminist framework, and we are working with some ideas of the real abstraction and the game.
There's a lot of crossing between groups and stuff like that. Thank you, Eduardo. Anna, next.
Hi, I'm Anna. I'm based in Philadelphia. So like Eduardo said, that's one thing I'm working on with her and Lika, and also Ellie Cho, who's here and is gonna probably say some stuff about her side of that project too. But and like JP mentioned as well, my overall framing is kind of a combination of Marxism, psychoanalysis, and cybernetics. In terms of like what I'm actually doing, I'm pursuing a East Asian studies degree, partially out of an interest in East Asian Marxism and history, but also out of an interest in the intersections between the influence and role of East Asian philosophy on East Asian Marxism and possible ways to expand that kind of connection. But like just do a ton of shit. Like I did a presentation at a philosophy of language conference on Wittgensteinian thought, Madhyamaka Buddhism, and developments in artificial intelligence. And I have like my fingers in a ton of different pies right now. I work with the subset of theoretical practice as well, which JP is a part of. And I kind of see a lot of my project as like basically the same as JP's broader project. I tend to hit it from a slightly different angle. Like I've been getting really into Caron Cordella lately. And I feel like, especially her most recent book, Epistemology, is basically doing what JP is doing here, except from more of a kind of like, you know, specifically, I guess, Lacanian rather than Sellarsian point of view. But I'm really sort of coming around to the view that I think the Lacanian and Sellarsians are kind of really generatively complementary to each other. So I'd really love to see more interrogation of that relationship.
Thank you, Anna. Who else? Denise.
hope you can hear me. My internet connection is not very well. I'm Denise. I'm originally from Mexico, and I studied architecture. But I think the last years I've been writing and also independent curating. And I started in the New Center in the program of art and curatorial practice, but then I switched to critical philosophy because I think it aligns more with the themes that I'm interested. And the past years, I think I'm also interested in the seminar because the past years I've also been working with Marxist theory. I've been doing research on labor, particularly in relation to online supermarket labor and like post-Fordist capitalism, and trying to somehow link that with, like theories of structural racism. So I'm interested in that, and particularly immigrant labor, because I was living in the Netherlands for 7 years, so it was based on my own immigrant working experience. But I recently moved back to Mexico after all these years, so I'm also starting kind of different research here, more related with like environmental justice or dissident sexualities. So it's a bit of different stuff, but I'm interested in continuing expanding on readings of Marx, and I don't have a formal background in critical philosophy, so yeah.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you. It's good to have you. Raviv, you didn't present.
Hi, I'm Raviv. I'm from New York City. That's where I'm living right now. I'm a certificate student in critical philosophy, trying to do some kind of, I don't know, I haven't really figured much out yet. I'm just very much like trying to learn as much as possible, interested in Sellars and Marx. So this is a pretty easy decision to take this class for me. So yeah, that's all I have to say.
Fantastic. Thank you, Raviv. Ellie?
Hi, very sorry no one can see me right now. My camera actually isn't working. I'll try to get it fixed before the next session, but hello. I'm a comparative literature student at Columbia, and I'm a writer. My current project right now is I'm working with Kenji Shiratori on a magazine about posthumanism. I'm not very familiar with Sellars in the slightest. My background is mostly like Western Marxism, queer Marxism, psychoanalysis, and Uruguay. But I'm really interested in the intersection between like social practice, material development, and consciousness. So I'm trying to find like a broader lexicon or more procedures to engage with that. But yeah, Anna introduced me to the course. I was very interested.
Thank you, Ellie. It's great. Is there anybody left? I don't think so. I think everybody did the presentation. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, guys, Discord channel is with Icaro. The new center is responsible for the Discord channel, so somebody has to create it, and we can have conversations there, or either there or in the Google Classroom. Usually people don't like to use this stuff so much, which is bad. I think we should keep discussing. Oh, yeah, there's Curtis. Curtis, is Curtis presenting, or Curtis is just... Curtis? I didn't see that you were there. Yeah, it's not there. So should we wrap it up?
Let's do it. See you guys till next section. Bye-bye.
Oh, that was short. Okay. Thank you all.
You can address it.
Thank you all. See you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye. See you.